The Dark Ages. It sounds so dramatic, doesn't it? Conjures images of mud, misery, and people being aggressively ignorant for about 1,000 years. Well, you can thank a 14th century Italian poet and scholar named Petrarch for that. He looked back at the 9 centuries after the fall of Rome and decided it was all a bit tasteless. He basically gave a millennium of human history a 1-star review because people weren't writing Latin poetry exactly like his hero, Cicero. His big complaint was a lack of good literature, which is a bit like complaining about the Wi-Fi speed during the apocalypse. He called it a Saeculum Obscurum, a dark age, and the name, unfortunately, stuck. So, was everyone just sitting around in the dark waiting for the Renaissance? Not exactly. Meet Charlemagne, king of the Franks, warlord, and a man who, despite barely being able to write his own name, became obsessed with education. He decided his vast, chaotic empire needed a system-wide software update. In the late 8th century, he gathered the best minds he could find, like the scholar Alcuin of York, and launched what we now call the Carolingian Renaissance. They standardized scripture, restarted schools, and, most importantly, invented a new kind of writing. It's called Carolingian minuscule. It introduced lowercase letters and, blessedly, spaces between words. Before this, everything was written in all caps with no gaps. It was a usability nightmare. This one change made texts vastly easier to read and copy, effectively saving Western literacy. The monasteries weren't just prayer centers, they were the hard drives of civilization. While mainland Europe was dealing with Vikings and political fragmentation, Irish monks on their remote island were on a copying frenzy. They preserved countless classical texts, philosophy, science, poetry that would have otherwise vanished forever. Meanwhile, the Islamic world was having its golden age. While Europe was rediscovering how to make a decent road, scholars in Baghdad's House of Wisdom were translating all of Aristotle into Arabic. This knowledge didn't stay walled off. It seeped back into Europe through places like Spain and Sicily. A French monk named Gerbert of Aurillac studied in Islamic Spain around 967 AD and brought back Arabic numerals and the abacus. This guy would later become Pope Sylvester II. So yes, the head of the Catholic Church at the turn of the millennium was a math geek who got his best ideas from Muslims. The real progress in this era wasn't always glamorous. Sometimes it was just about dirt. Roman plows were light, flimsy things designed for the sandy soils of the Mediterranean. They were completely useless in the heavy, wet clay soils of northern Europe. Enter the heavy plow, or karuka. This thing was a beast. It had a sharp iron coulter to slice the earth and a mold board to turn the soil over. This single invention opened up vast new territories for farming. Suddenly, the dense forests of France and Germany could be turned into productive farmland. It led to a food surplus, which in turn led to population growth. It's not sexy, but the heavy plow arguably did more to shape modern Europe than any king or battle. And the agricultural genius didn't stop there. For centuries, the best way to harness an animal was a strap around its neck. With an ox, this is fine. With a horse, you're just efficiently choking it. Then came the horse collar, a simple padded device that rests on the horse's shoulders, allowing it to pull with its full strength. Suddenly, a horse could do 50% more work than an ox in the same amount of time. It was the agricultural equivalent of inventing the engine. Then they combined this with the 3-field crop rotation system. Instead of leaving half your land fallow each year, you'd plant 2/3 of it with different crops at different times. It increased harvests, provided a more varied diet, and acted as insurance against one crop failing. These weren't dark ideas, they were brilliant innovations that let people eat. The idea that art and culture died is perhaps the most insulting myth. People didn't just forget how to make beautiful things. Have you ever seen the Book of Kells? It's an illuminated manuscript from around 800 AD. The level of detail is microscopic. The artists created carpet pages of pure, intricate geometric design that serve no purpose other than to be breathtakingly beautiful. They used pigments made from crushed insects and lapis lazuli imported all the way from Afghanistan. In a dark age? Or look at the Sutton Hoo helmet, an Anglo-Saxon treasure found in England. This is the work of master craftsmen, a stunning piece of intricate metalwork and garnet inlay. These barbarians, in their supposed mud huts, were creating art so complex and resource-intensive that we struggle to comprehend it today. Okay, fine, they lost the Roman recipe for concrete. A major blunder, I'll grant you. But they didn't stop building big, impressive structures. They just changed the style. This is the era of Romanesque architecture. Think massive stone churches with thick walls, rounded arches, and tiny windows. Charlemagne's Palatine Chapel in Aachen is a perfect example. It's not the Parthenon. It's heavy, solid, and imposing. The architecture reflects the mindset. In a world of political instability and frequent raids, you built your churches like fortresses. They weren't trying to be elegant and airy. They were trying to build a structure that felt eternal and, more practically, could survive a Viking attack. It was a design philosophy born from pragmatism, not ignorance. Another popular image is of empty, ruined Roman cities and a world devoid of urban life. Not quite. Cities changed their function. Roman cities were sprawling administrative centers for a giant empire. Early medieval towns were smaller, more compact, and often walled for defense. They were hubs for local trade and seats of bishops or lords. And trade absolutely did not stop. It just got more adventurous. The Vikings, for example, were not just raiders. They were incredible merchants and explorers. They established trade routes that connected Scandinavia with Constantinople, which they called Miklagard, and even Baghdad. They were moving furs, amber, and enslaved people south and bringing back silver, spices, and silk. Their business model was just a bit more aggressive than most. The world was far from disconnected. For a truly wild example, look up the Ravanites. These were medieval Jewish merchants who, in the 9th century, maintained a network of trade routes stretching from southern France all the way to India and China. They spoke Arabic, Persian, Greek, and Slavic languages. They traded European swords for Asian camphor and musk. This wasn't an isolated, backwards Europe. It was a Europe that was finding new, more challenging ways to connect to the wider world. Meanwhile, legal systems were evolving. In England, Alfred the Great wasn't just fending off Vikings, he was commissioning the translation of books from Latin into Anglo-Saxon. He wanted laws and histories to be accessible to people who couldn't read Latin. That's a remarkably forward-thinking, enlightened idea for a supposedly dark time. So, if all this was happening, why the terrible reputation? It comes down to branding. Remember Petrarch? He wanted to glorify his own era, the Renaissance, as a rebirth of classical greatness. And for something to be reborn, something else has to die. The Middle Ages became the necessary villain, the cultural wasteland that made the Renaissance look so good in comparison. Then, a few centuries later, Enlightenment thinkers like Voltaire doubled down on it. They hated the power and influence of the Catholic Church, and since the Middle Ages were the height of church power, they painted the whole period as an age of superstition and oppression to promote their own Age of Reason. It's one of history's most successful marketing campaigns. To make yourself look brilliant, just call the era before yours the Dark Ages. Let's be clear, the centuries after Rome's fall were not a cakewalk. Life was hard. There was immense political fragmentation, brutal violence, and a significant loss of some specific types of knowledge. But it wasn't an empty void. It was a messy, complex, and transformative period. It was the crucible in which the foundations of modern Europe were forged. New languages, new laws, new technologies, and new nations all emerged from this supposed darkness. Calling it the Dark Ages is lazy. It's like calling adolescence the awkward age. While technically true, it completely misses the point that it's the chaotic, formative period where everything important actually starts to happen. If you enjoyed this video, please like, comment, and subscribe to our channel for more historical insights. Thanks for watching, nerds!